The envelope appeared on my porch as if conjured by the night itself. The heavy cream-colored paper bore no stamp or address, only my name scrawled in an elegant, looping script. A faint whiff of lavender, old and cloying, clung to it. My fingers hesitated before picking it up. Something about its presence felt intrusive, as though the envelope had a will of its own. I glanced around the neighborhood. The street was dark and still, lit only by the weak glow of a single street lamp, its light flickering like a dying pulse. No one stirred, no cars passing, no curtains twitching. Just the endless quiet of suburban anonymity. My breath clouded the air as I broke the seal, revealing a card inside. Its surface shimmered faintly under the porch light, embossed with a message written in the same delicate hand. Join us at number 27, midnight. The words were deceptively simple, yet they carried a weight that made my chest tighten. Number 27 was the house across the street, an enigma in our otherwise friendly community. Its curtains were perpetually drawn, its driveway overgrown with weeds, and its front yard eerily pristine, as though time refused to touch it. Neighbors speculated endlessly about its inhabitants, or lack thereof. Some swore they'd seen movement behind its windows, shadows flickering in rooms that had no lights. Others said the house had been empty for decades. I folded the card, trying to ignore the sense of unease gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Midnight was hours away, and I could easily forget the invitation, let curiosity go unanswered. Yet the card stayed with me, its words etching themselves into my mind like a whispering echo. By the time the clock struck 11:30, I was pacing my living room, the invitation resting heavily in my pocket. Each tick of the clock seemed louder, more insistent, as though pushing me toward a decision. The air in the house felt stifling despite the coolness of the evening. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, unable to shake the pull of the message. The street seemed longer as I crossed it, each step sinking me deeper into the suffocating quiet. Number 27 loomed ahead, its silhouette darker than the sky behind it. As I approached, I noticed the faintest flicker of light through the curtains, a warm golden glow that seemed at odds with the house's foreboding exterior. The front door stood ajar, an unspoken invitation. My fingers brushed against the worn wood as I pushed it open, and the hinges groaned in protest. The interior was dimly lit by a single chandelier hanging high above the foyer. Dust motes swirled in the light, and the air was thick with the scent of old wood and faintly decaying flowers. "Hello?" My voice sounded too small, swallowed by the cavernous silence of the house. There was no reply, only the faint hum of what could have been wind or breathing somewhere deep within the halls. Despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that made my stomach lurch. The first thing I noticed was the stillness. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but an oppressive, unnatural absence of sound. The walls seemed to absorb every noise, from the shuffle of my steps on the hardwood floor to the creak of a loose board beneath my weight. I clutched the edges of my coat, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. The house's interior defied logic. Though it was clearly old, the furnishings were pristine, as if frozen in time. Velvet chairs arranged around a low mahogany table, an ornate grandfather clock ticking soundlessly in the corner. The wallpaper, a deep emerald green embossed with curling vines, seemed alive, shimmering faintly in the chandelier's light. And then there was the mirror. It stood in the center of the foyer, towering and framed in gold, so intricately carved that it resembled tangled roots. The glass was spotless, reflecting not just my own pale, uneasy face, but the room behind me in startling clarity. I turned quickly, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the space was empty. I exhaled shakily and moved further into the house. The soft carpet beneath my feet seemed to dampen even the sound of my breathing. Every door I passed was closed, each one identical, painted white with brass knobs that gleamed faintly. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the corridor. My pulse quickened as I approached. Through the gap, I glimpsed what looked like a library, shelves stacked with books whose spines gleamed like treasure. The light came from a fire crackling in a stone hearth, though I saw no smoke or embers, only the unnerving steadiness of the flames. Inside, the sense of stillness deepened. I hesitated on the threshold, my gaze catching on a journal lying open on a desk. The handwriting matched the script from the invitation, fluid and almost hypnotic in its curves. I stepped closer, drawn by the words as if they were meant for me. To those who cross this threshold know this: our town is not as it seems. There is a balance, one that requires our presence and our discretion. You have seen us, and now you must understand us. Do not fear what you find. Fear what lies beyond. A cold prickle ran down my spine as I turned the page, but the sound of footsteps behind me made me freeze. They were soft but deliberate, echoing faintly in the stillness. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. The hall was empty. Yet in the mirror across the room, I saw a figure standing behind me, its face obscured, its head tilted as if watching. I didn't dare turn again. Instead, I closed the journal, its weight chilling in my hands, and backed away toward the library door. As I stepped into the hall, the light in the room flickered and went out, leaving me in near darkness. Only the mirror's reflection remained, a faint glow where the figure still lingered. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched as I retreated from the library, clutching the journal tightly against my chest. The figure in the mirror haunted my thoughts, its presence lingering like a shadow burned into my mind. My breath came in shallow bursts, each exhale misting faintly in the unnaturally cold air of the house. The hall seemed longer now, its walls narrowing, the faint patterns on the wallpaper shifting whenever I wasn't looking directly at them. My footsteps fell silently, swallowed by the thick carpet beneath me, and the air buzzed faintly with an energy I couldn't name. I had to leave. Whatever answers the journal held, they could wait until I was safely outside. Yet as I turned back toward the foyer, the house resisted me. The doors I had passed earlier were now ajar, revealing darkened rooms that hadn't been there moments ago. Each room seemed identical, empty save for faintly glowing mirrors that stood in the center of each space. The reflections in these mirrors were wrong, dim, distorted, and filled with movement that didn't correspond to the stillness of the rooms. I felt an overwhelming pull to look into them, but I forced my gaze forward, clutching the journal tighter. The mirrors exuded a quiet menace, their darkened surfaces promising revelations I wasn't ready to face. The chandelier in the foyer was my beacon, its dim light flickering faintly. As I approached, the air thickened, heavy with a presence I couldn't see but could feel. The journal in my hands grew colder, the chill creeping into my skin, slowing my movements. My own reflection in the large mirror at the base of the stairs caught my eye. It was distorted, like the glass was rippling. I stopped, unable to resist the pull of the image. It wasn't just me in the reflection. Behind me, countless figures stood in the shadowed hallway, watching with faces blurred and indistinct. They didn't move, but their presence pressed against my senses like a storm building on the horizon. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figures didn't respond. Instead, the glass shimmered, and the words from the journal began to appear on the mirror, written in the same flowing hand. "You see us because the veil is thin. You disturb the balance." I stepped back, my pulse racing. The figures in the mirror grew clearer, their features taking shape as they watched me with expressions I couldn't name, neither hostile nor welcoming, but expectant. I felt as if they were waiting for something, some acknowledgement or action that I couldn't comprehend. A sound broke the silence, faint but deliberate. A slow creak, like a door opening deeper within the house. I turned, clutching the journal as I made my way toward the sound. I wasn't sure why I followed it. Curiosity, dread, or the magnetic pull that had led me to the house in the first place. The hallway ended in a spiral staircase descending into darkness, and the sound of faint whispers rose from below. The spiral staircase twisted like the spine of some ancient creature, each step creaking under my weight. The whispers grew louder as I descended, overlapping voices speaking in languages I didn't understand. The air thickened, carrying a faint scent of earth and damp stone. I felt like I was sinking, the house pulling me deeper into its core. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a circular room lined with bookshelves. The air was cooler here, the faint glow of candlelight illuminating the space. In the center of the room stood a table, its surface covered in papers, maps, and sketches of the town I had thought I knew so well. The sketches were detailed, each one marked with faintly glowing runes that seemed to pulse in time with my racing heartbeat. The maps were stranger still, showing streets and landmarks that didn't exist, or at least not in the town as I knew it. At the center of one map, marked with a swirling symbol, was the house I now stood in. "You've seen us," the voice came from behind me, soft and melodic, yet filled with an otherworldly weight. I turned to see a figure standing just at the edge of the candlelight. Unlike the shadowed figures in the mirrors, this one was clear, its form human yet faintly translucent. It was a woman, her features sharp and angular, her eyes glowing faintly with the same light that illuminated the maps. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We are the unseen," she said, stepping closer. Her movements were graceful, almost floating. "We are the remnants, the echoes of what this town once was. You should not have come here." "I didn't mean to disturb you," I said, my words tumbling over themselves. There was a letter." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "The invitation was a test, to see if you could perceive us. You are not like the others. You walk between the worlds without knowing it." Her words chilled me. "Why are you here? Why hide?" "The veil between worlds is fragile," she said. "We are the guardians of this place, ensuring balance, but your presence disrupts it. You must leave or risk unraveling what keeps your town safe." I glanced at the journal in my hands. "What is this?" Her gaze flicked to it, and for the first time, her expression shifted, something like fear. "That holds truths not meant for the living. It is a key and a burden. Do not open it lightly." The candles flickered, and the whispers grew louder, as if the house itself was responding to her words. "You have a choice," she said, her form beginning to fade. "Leave now and forget this place, or stay and face what lies beyond the veil. But know this, once you see, you cannot unsee. The truth will bind you, as it has bound us." Before I could reply, the room dimmed, and she vanished, leaving me alone with the journal and the unrelenting whispers. The room seemed to exhale as the figure disappeared, the whispers receding into a faint hum that settled in the corners. The candlelight dimmed until the glow barely reached the edges of the circular space. I clutched the journal tighter, its cold surface a grounding anchor against the surreal weight of the encounter. Her words lingered. "Leave now or face what lies beyond the veil." But leaving felt impossible. The pull of the house, the whispers, and the truth hiding in the pages I hadn't yet dared to open kept me rooted. Something about the phrase "the truth will bind you" gnawed at the edges of my mind, like a warning wrapped in riddles. I turned back to the table. The maps, with their shifting symbols and unnerving familiarity, drew my eye. My town, its streets, buildings, and boundaries, looked as though it were alive on the parchment, the lines faintly pulsating like a heartbeat. At the center, the house was marked with a bold symbol that glowed brighter the longer I looked at it. A faint chill drifted through the room, carrying a sound, soft, rhythmic, like the distant tapping of raindrops on glass. The sound wasn't coming from above, where the stormless sky should have been, but from the walls themselves. I traced my gaze along the edges of the room, my pulse quickening as I noticed faint handprints smudged into the stone walls. They were large and small, some barely visible, others stark and clear, as though pressed there moments ago. As I stared, the tapping grew louder, joined by a soft, melodic hum that seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once. With shaking hands, I set the journal on the table and opened it. The pages fluttered as if alive, settling on a passage halfway through. The text was fluid, almost shimmering, and though the words were in no language I recognized, their meaning settled heavy in my mind. The community of the unseen is eternal. Their duty is bound to the spaces between, guardians of the balance that keeps what lies beyond from spilling into what lies within. I barely had time to process the words when the air shifted again, thick and heavy with the sensation of unseen eyes. I looked up to find the room had grown darker. The walls, once stone, now appeared endless, fading into a soft, gray mist. And then I saw them. Figures moved within the mist, their forms vague and indistinct, like smoke shaped into the semblance of human bodies. They gathered at the edges of the room, just beyond the light, their faces flickering into clarity for brief moments before dissolving again. Each face was unique, but bore the same expression, watchful, waiting. "You linger," a voice whispered, cutting through the hum like a cold blade. It wasn't the voice of the woman from before, but something older, deeper, layered with countless tones that rose and fell like a tide. I don't understand," I stammered, stepping back from the table. The figures didn't respond, but the mist began to shift, drawing closer. With it came a sensation I couldn't describe, a weight on my chest, a dull ache behind my eyes, as if the air itself pressed against me, forcing me to confront their presence. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice trembling. The journal's pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped on a blank sheet. Words scrawled themselves across the surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. "You were chosen because you can see. Few possess the sight, fewer still the will to act. You must decide, restore the balance, or leave it to decay." "Restore the balance," I whispered. "How?" The glow on the page brightened, and for a moment, the words shifted into symbols, their meanings flooding into my mind like a rushing tide. I saw visions, fractured glimpses of the house, the town, and the figures beyond the veil, each tied together in a web of light and shadow. The mist pressed closer, the figures within it more distinct now, their forms flickering with urgency. The journal's pages glowed with a faint golden hue, as if urging me to act, but no clear instructions followed. "You hold the key," the voice whispered again. "But beware. Once you choose, the path cannot be undone." A sudden clarity struck me. The journal, the maps, the house, they were all conduits, tools to maintain the barrier between the unseen and the living world. But my tampering had weakened it. Closing the journal would restore the barrier, locking the unseen away once more. Leaving it open would bind me to their world forever, as a bridge between the two realms. The figures watched, their forms swaying gently, the air humming with tension. With trembling hands, I closed the journal. The mist recoiled instantly, retreating into the walls as if pulled by an unseen force. The air lightened, the oppressive weight lifting, and the room grew still. The figures faded into the darkness, their watchful eyes the last to disappear. The voice returned, softer now, almost kind. "You have done well. For now, the balance holds." As I ascended the spiral staircase, the house felt lighter, its unnatural stillness replaced by a faint warmth. When I stepped outside, the night was calm, the stars bright above. Number 27 stood as it always had, silent and enigmatic. But now I understood its purpose. I left the street without looking back, the weight of the unseen world heavy in my mind. Though I had restored the balance, I knew it wasn't the end. The veil was thin, and it always would be.